my very distinguished and respected colleagues. My name is Senator Theodore Orji Ochendo. I represent Abia Central. It's a pleasure to me to lead this debate on a bill for an act to make provision for freedom from hunger and the right to adequate food of acceptable quality, right of every child to basic nutrition, and for connected purposes, commonly referred to as food security bill. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, recall that this bill was read for the first time on the floor of the Senate on Thursday, the 8th of October, 2015. The bill seeks to make provision for freedom from hunger, create basic rights to food of acceptable quality, and the right of every child to basic nutrition. The right to food is a basic human right which protects the right of all human beings to be free from hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. Food and its production are the most basic of human concerns and were at the foundation of civilization. Despite the tremendous progress achieved by humanity, we continue to struggle to meet the basic needs of mankind. It is important to point out that food security means far more than having sufficient food to meet human needs on a national basis. Other very important factors include access to safe drinking water, primary health care, and environmental hygiene. Mr. President and distinguished colleagues, after the world food crisis in 2008, developing countries have been enacting laws aimed at food security. Mauritius, for example, enacted a food security fund to enhance local production of food by tackling all the problems militating against it. The importance of this bill to our growing economy can easily be seen in the objectives and purposes of the bill as contained in Section 3. They include A, to provide a framework that promotes the realization of the right to freedom from hunger and access to food of acceptable quality as a fundamental human right. B, to provide a framework that promotes the elimination and prevention of discrimination of marginalized groups in the access and distribution of food. C, to provide a framework that promotes food production, self-sustenance, and food security in relation to all persons in Nigeria. D, to provide a framework and mechanism for the coordinated implementation of the national policy programs and plans on food security by state governments. E, to provide a mechanism for ensuring that poor persons access food at all times in adequate quantities and quality through the implementation of state-sponsored programs. F, to provide a framework for the planning, budgeting, and implementation of the national policy on food security and nutrition using a rice approach and to ensure the participation of rice holders and the accountability of duty holders. G, to guarantee the integration of the needs of vulnerable persons in food and nutrition strategies. H, to ensure that food is treated as a national strategic resource. I, to ensure that emergency situations that threaten mass access to food are anticipated, mitigated, and addressed with equity and speed. And J, to provide for a cross-sectional networking platform comprising all relevant ministries, agencies, and actors concerned with the production, storage, and sales of food for purposes connected to ensuring access to food by all Nigerians at all times. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, whereas Section 4 of the bill has heaped obligations, guides, and principles on all persons that get involved with food security. Under sections 5 and 6, both federal and state governments are obliged to carry out certain functions that relate to availability, acceptability, adaptability, and accessibility of food to all in Nigeria. In the same vein, by the provisions of Section 8 of the bill, federal and state governments shall, to the extent of their mandate under the Constitution, guarantee and promote child nutrition. And by Section 9, every woman has the right to adequate food during pregnancy and lactation. By provisions, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Part 3 of the bill establishes the Food Security Agency. Some of the functions of the agency in the bill include: A, to formulate strategies, plans, and programs to facilitate the realization of the right to food, taking into cognizance the right of vulnerable and marginalized persons. B, to monitor and evaluate the implementation of policies, plans, and strategies on food security and nutrition in Nigeria by the Food Security Committees. C, appraise and review the levels of access to food by all Nigerians in terms of quantity and quality, and liaise with the State Food Security Committee and relevant agencies to ensure optimal access. D, to collaborate with relevant agencies and stakeholders in the establishment of appropriate mechanisms to ensure access to food by poor persons to adequate food in both quality and quantity. E, to promote measures to improve security and access to land and water resources and the optimum and sustainable utilization of these resources. F, monitor the issuance and administration of the food eligibility card to eligible Nigerians by the State Food Security Committee to ensure that poor persons access food with ease and in a timely manner. G, monitor the implementation of the food distribution program and the food subsidy program by the State Food Security Committee. H, monitor and evaluate the implementation policies, plans, and strategies on food security and nutrition in Nigeria, and provide feedback to relevant ministries, agencies, and actors concerned with food production, storage, and sales for their further action. Section 10 of the bill prohibits discrimination by government against any person or persons and makes provision for remedy of past discrimination in relation to right to food. The management of the agency is vested in a board established under Section 14 of the bill. There are, of course, provisions for chairmanship, membership of the board, tenure of office, powers of the board, etc., etc. By the provisions of Section 32 of the bill, there shall be established in each state of the Federation a State Food Security Committee whose function shall include: A, to implement the food security policy and programs in the state; B, advise the agency on technical issues relating to the implementation of different programs on food security within the state; C, provide early warning mechanism on impending food insecurity situations within the states and advise on mitigation measures; D, to initiate, undertake, and participate in the collection, preparation, production, and the dissemination of data and information on food security and nutrition in the state; E, to ensure proper identification of food insecure areas, appropriate programs, and eligible beneficiaries in relation to food security; F, to ensure that food and nutrition scarcity issues are incorporated in the programs of the state and monitor the performance of each state in the implementation of the policies, programs, and plans on food and nutrition security issues. G, determine the essential food stocks and commodities within the state for the purpose of implementing food distribution programs and food subsidy programs. H, spearhead the formation and operationalization of food and nutrition committees at committee levels and in schools and health centers. Section 35, Part 7 of the bill establishes a food insecurity and information mapping system, making it mandatory for the agency to work in collaboration with ministries of finance, disaster management, planning, and national security to provide the information needed to develop and strengthen the capacity to respond to food emergencies. Provision is also made in the bill on food impact assessment. Under Section 37, the President has power to declare a food emergency if, in his opinion, there is a major shortfall in the domestic production of availability of a designated agricultural commodity. When the President declares a food emergency, the powers of the agency abate and vest in the minister. Ample provisions have also been made in the bill in relation to funds for the agency, the investment of funds, annual estimates, accounts, and audit of accounts of the agency. Part 10, sections 44 to 49 are miscellaneous provisions which enact offenses and penalties in relation to food security. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, with a phenomenal population growth in Nigeria, agricultural production can no longer be self-regulated. With new food and waterborne diseases springing up on a daily basis, with the phenomenon of climate change having drastic effects on food production, government at all levels must rise up and ensure that the whole population have access to daily requirement of adequate food of acceptable quality and quantity. Governments must be committed to creating and sustaining the enabling political, social, and economic environment, which are essential foundation to give priority to food security and poverty eradication. These are what the bill is all about. In line with our order 73, a compendium of the financial implication of the bill is hereby attached. I therefore wish all my distinguished colleagues to give their support to this bill, which is important and which will free us from hunger. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
Senator Adeleke.